topic of competition an interesting discussion among parents. Is it good or bad for our kids? I believe there are certain components that are healthy for development and resiliency, but is there a downside? Today, my guests will share with us their take on competition for kids and when you should worry if a competitive atmosphere is too much for them. Welcome to Beyond the Classroom. I'm your host, Cathy Thompson. With us today is my first guest, Lisa Michaels. Lisa is the co-founder of Bandology, a local nonprofit dedicated to more music for more kids. A self-employed marketing consultant and serial entrepreneur, has run multiple businesses for more than 2 decades. Lisa is passionate about the long-term benefits of music education. And today she's talking to us about competition. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cathy. Nice to be here.
That's great. So Bandology, tell me about that. I love the name. When I came across it, I went through your website. I just think it's fantastic. I love the fact that you're focused on giving more music to more kids. So share with us about Bandology.
Yeah, so it really came about 5 years ago. My daughter happened to be going to a high school with a strong music program, lots of festivals and competitions. And my son was at a different high school and they really didn't do much outside of class. And it was all about how can we give kids across Halton the opportunity to do music? How can we get them out there collaborating, working together more? So along with a fellow parent, Peter Van Duzer, and I co-founded Bandology in January 2017. We run band camps. In the summer, we do a play gig program, giving kids opportunities to perform in the community or online these days. And then we do a whole bunch of research and resources and curriculum development for educators and for parents. And then we also advocate for music education with presentations and workshops at conferences. So we're really all about sharing the absolute studies and research and data that says music is a long-term benefit for your kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I love the fact that you saw a need in the community through your own children. You know, one's getting all this music education through the school system, another isn't, but you know, you don't know what you're missing sometimes. And I think it's a really interesting take on the organization and how you're really passionate about giving musical opportunities for kids.
Well, and there's not a lot of places where kids can actually do music that's curriculum related, because we're pretty passionate about that part too. It's great to do piano lessons, and it's great to go to rock band camp, but this is a chance for kids to put into practice the skills they've actually learned in school from about grade 6 or 7 on to grade 12.
Okay, and so do you do like Royal Conservatory prep through that, or is it mainly you know, working through the levels and the skill set per the curriculum?
Yeah, so not at all Royal Conservatory based. It is a collaborative sport. It's always about the band, the collaborative band. In the schools, kids learn woodwinds and brass and percussion, except for one school, they don't learn strings. So woodwind, brass, and percussion is what they have learned to play. So we actually do, from that perspective, we do use curriculum. Music for concert band is graded into 5 levels in Canada. So there's level 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. Our band camp's about a level 2 or 3, which is pretty decent. And we really wanted to be the one place in the greater GTA that offers this type of camp. The only other one is IMC, which is a great overnight camp up in Parry Sound at the end of August. But there's no place that's local day camp where kids can go and play their saxophone and play their clarinet and play the French horn together in a band setting.
Love that. So interesting. And another question off the top of my head, do kids get credits for this because it is following the music education curriculum? Is it something that is accredited?
That's cool. That's an interesting question. The short answer is no. We do hire in music educators, so teachers who are certified with the Ontario College of Teachers, and we generally get the top ones in the GTA. From the perspective of our Play a Gig program, where kids pull together their own student-led ensembles to play in the community, we're able to offer volunteer hours for the high school kids in the time it takes for them to practice, to get to an event, to play at the event, to pack up. It gives them a lot of experience on running something themselves.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. Just integrating all those different pieces that really fit nicely together. And so the show today is about competition. friend or foe. So I know that you've done a lot of research about competition, and I'd love for you to share with us some of the benefits that you see of being in a competitive atmosphere.
Yeah, so there's something special about being part of a band. So, my kids have played soccer, and one's a competitive runner, and they've done sports, or they've been part of a cast for a drama production. But band is the only place where you have to all work together as a team. So when a child plays an instrument, for example, they're doing everything all at once, right? All the brain synapses are firing at once. So they're reading the music, they're translating that into their brain, they're using their mouth and their fingers to manipulate the instrument, they're using math to count the notes, so much math in music. They're using science to get the best that they can out of the instrument. So all that is a challenge. And then you put the collaborative aspect in it. So if a child plays the clarinet, they've got to make sure that they're playing along with the other clarinets in that section. If they play the trombone and they're playing the harmony part, they have to make sure they don't suddenly go into that melody part from the person right next to them. And then they have to pay attention, get their eyes off their sheet music, up over to the conductor to watch for tempo and dynamics and those types of changes. So they have to get all of those things together. And then before all of that, they got to be practicing at home. So parents have to put up with that squeaky clarinet or lugging the humongous tuba home in the car so that they can develop the skills they need to work collaboratively in a band. And then everything they do in band is a transferable skills. And those are the ones at the bottom of every job application, whether you're 16 or 60. It says problem solving, collaboration, teamwork, time management, communications, adaptability, critical thinking. And transferable skills is what builds resiliency in kids and gives them that chance that as they come into a competition, they can perform. They're not one person on their own with all the nerves that go along with it. They are part of a group of 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 kids who are working collaboratively together.
Yeah, so many interesting points about how everything works together and is so good for their development and so challenging. I've never personally been in a band, so to me hearing that sounds really overwhelming, and it's so amazing that all of these kids and young adults can really work together in this way. So they play together collaboratively. Is there a place where the kids themselves may have a bit of competition among each other? Do you ever see that? I mean, it can be healthy and, I can learn this faster than you, but is there kind of an element of that as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, Cathy. I sort of invited myself into a local high school band club today, and I asked the kids that, and I said, do you ever find yourself, competing? And they said, yeah, they compete against themselves and their expectation of what they're able to do. They listen to the people on either side of them and say, I got to be as good as that person. Depending on the caliber of the band, they may have to audition to get in. And so they're, part of that group of nervous kids waiting in the hall for it to be their turn. So there is that sort of, there's the nerves and all of that part of that go along with it. Where competition is sort of, inspiring them and having them move their skills along.
Yeah, and they say, when people are training, for example, for skiing, or one of your children's involved with competitive running, running against somebody or competing against someone even alongside them who is a little bit better can bring up that level of proficiency with something. So, having these kids, dedicated to band and going to competitions together, learning from each other and bringing their skill set up just through the nature of that.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the things the kids said to me today is that it's a motivator. It motivates them to keep working. It gives them something to aim for, something to strive for. It makes them avoid procrastination. Right? If you've got to be good for rehearsal this week, then you've got to practice today. It gets them past the feeling of being plateaued. Lots of athletes get to the plateau stage, and so do musicians, and especially student musicians. How do I get past this difficult passage I can't do? How can I hit the high note or sustain the low note? It's about how can they sort of move on and strive forward.
That makes total sense to me. That's fantastic. And I'm a proponent of competitive opportunities, even like racing, running against each other or board games or different things, because it teaches you how to win and it teaches you how to lose. And, you know, just one of the things, but teaching so many more elements that add to kids' resiliency and development. And so what other ways can we foster healthy competition for our children and youth?
Sorry, I think I missed that, Kathy. I think my internet for the first time went down today.
No problem. I was just asking, what are some other ways that you can suggest that we can foster competition among children and youth?
Well, I sort of, you know, it's difficult right now, but the schools are there, and there's so many dedicated music teachers, other teachers who get themselves involved in working with the students. So, you know, we live in Oakville and Halton, and you know, it's not maybe there are some socioeconomic challenges in certain places. So students that might not, student families that might not have the money for full-on hockey, for example, maybe they participate via their school. They get the chance to be part of a community there, and they get to try a lot of different things, whether it's hockey team at school, or the drama club, or the art club, or debate, or Meet a Wee, or student council, or the music program. Mm-hmm. It gives them that chance to compete in a safe space with people who are intrinsically interested in their success. It's not about the, you know, I won, it's about we did it. How did we all do together? We all work together, and we all work together as a team to win the competition or to win the game.
Absolutely. And I think that those are, you know, like you said, all of those key skills that job interviews or applicants need to have, you know, cooperation and all that good stuff that you mentioned earlier. And so before we go, what resources can you suggest for parents watching at home?
Yeah, well, at Bandology, we've done a lot of research lately. Over the past year, we've done weekly research posts about the value of music education. So I'd highly recommend check out bandology.ca/research. And you'll find all sorts of studies there about competition, about how being part of a music program gives you higher emotional intelligence, higher IQ, greater test scores, higher empathy scores, coping strategies, higher memory scores. Some of the places where it's really factual says that you can have 5 to 15% higher grades if you're enrolled in music. And then there's other resources that give you some ideas about curriculum and about ways to get involved in music.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for being on the show today. I really appreciate you creating or co-creating Bandology and giving kids that opportunity to experience music and doing all of the research and curating it and all that great stuff. So just thank you so much for being on the program today.
Thanks, Kathy. I appreciate what you do as well.
Thank you. Welcome back to the show. I'd like to now introduce Candice Hamilton-Miller. Candice is a registered psychotherapist and owner of CHM Therapy Services. She has worked both in Canada and abroad with children, teens, and adults and their families for over 20 years. Through various roles in social service and health sectors over the years, she has supported individuals dealing with a wide range of issues, including special needs, mental health, chronic pain, behavioral concerns, life transitions, and family relationship issues. She is also a certified Cogmed coach. Through CHM Therapy Services, Candice and her team provide psychotherapy services, workshops, training, Cogmed, and support services for families. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Cathy. Thanks for having me.
No problem. So today we are talking about competition. But first, I am really curious, what is Cogmed? If you could give us a brief, I know we've talked about it in the past, but I was like, that is interesting. Can you share with our viewers about that?
Sure. So super quickly, Cogmed is basically it's a working memory training program. So it's a program that you do. It's very intensive. It's about an hour a day, 5 days a week for 5 weeks, and that's like just the beginning of it. And it's for working memory. So for individuals who struggle with organization, executive functioning, ADHD, those kinds of issues, that's where Cogmed is helpful.
Oh, amazing. And so is that something like a program that someone might do on their home in between sessions with you type of thing? So this ongoing practice?
Yeah. So Cogmed is typically, it's kind of its own program. So people would sign up to do the Cogmed program, and it's for adults or kids. So you would do the 5 weeks training whether or not you're doing therapy, although typically we say Cogmed, it's one of those things where it'll increase your ability for working memory, but it doesn't change the behavior that you've already learned around avoiding working memory tasks. So you might do therapy as well in order to build up the behavior change, but Cogmed itself is a standalone. Yeah.
Oh, really neat. Thanks for sharing that with us. Now on to competition. Okay, so as a registered psychotherapist, can you share with us more about some of the benefits to competition for kids?
For sure. So, there's actually a lot of benefits to competition, including things like building empathy. Competition can be motivating. It can get us to really try harder. It gets us to follow rules sometimes. There's so many benefits, and there's a big piece around confidence. When you succeed, when you're doing well, you feel better about yourself. You're more confident. You're more likely to try more varied things. So all in all, competition is really actually generally a pretty positive thing, provided the environment is such that it's a positive competition environment, right? So, yeah.
And you touched on a point that I hadn't considered before about empathy. The competitive environments can breed empathy. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So if you think about it, when you win or lose, right? Part of the task of being kind of say good at competition is being able to be a good winner or a good loser. So if you lose, being able to say, you know what, well done, you did great, I'm so proud of you, I can see you worked hard, and okay, you beat me, well done, right? But when you win, you also have to be able to be empathetic. So you have to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and recognize how they might be feeling in that moment. So winning or losing teaches empathy. And especially if you're in competitive sports or competitive activities that require teamwork, there empathy is key, because you have to be able to build your team up in order to progress forward. So that combination, empathy is actually often built through competitive type of sports, and not just for us, but in terms of the animal world too. So if you look at animal behavior, wrestling with young animals where they sort of pseudo fight, all of that requires, believe it or not, a certain amount of empathy in terms of recognizing that this thing is smaller, and so we're just play fighting, so we don't go all in. So there's a lot of empathy that gets built through that process of competition.
Those are great examples. And it's true, in terms of winning or losing, competition does teach you both sides of it. And I think that it does give you an appreciation for other people's perspectives. And oftentimes with children and youth up to a certain age, I think it's late teens, early 20s, it's hard for them to see somebody else's perspective. And that's just part of, natural development. So maybe that's something that they might learn a little bit earlier than normal, seeing those different perspectives through competition.
Absolutely. And for kids and teens now, I think about them, for example, in classes where they have to do group projects. So in a way, a group project is a kind of competitive team sport, right? And so you will often have one person who works harder, who does all the work, who gets frustrated, who feels like they're being taken advantage of by the group because they have to carry everybody. And then you have the person who's kind of slacking off and not doing anything because I don't care. And so, those kinds of environments, even there, we start to see that need for empathy and teamwork and all of those pieces that are actually built through competitive behaviors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like there's so many opportunities to be competitive that we don't really think about. I did a show actually in the first season, and we talked about competitive sports withdrawal, and I had a young athlete on the show, and then I also had actually my son's baseball coach, and he was talking about how during the pandemic he would look for ways to be competitive every day, to get that fire, to get that motivation, to get that energy. And I thought, well, I don't really look for ways and opportunities to be competitive, but that's what he was encouraging parents to do, of these young athletes, to stay mindful, like this is part of them, this is an important piece of it. And I just thought that was
absolutely. Well, and that's where they get their energy, right? So that's a really interesting piece. And I was having a discussion with someone the other day about this. It was quite funny. We were saying that my generation, as old as that makes me sound, one of the sort of tail end of the boomers and Gen X, you know, we did a lot of research around the negative consequences of competition and stress on children. And we were like, nope, everyone's going to get participation awards and it's going to be lovely. And we raised this generation of millennials who got participation awards. That's, you know, that was the thing. No one was competing. We were all just competing against ourselves. And ironically, it's the millennials who then created in their own way a platform, social media, where everything is based on likes and everything is based on judging and competition. Who has the nicest looking food picture? Who gets the most likes on their songs? And, you know, so it's funny because we tried to take it away thinking we were doing a good thing. And nope, they just all brought it back in their own way. So competition is definitely a part of human nature. And we are pack animals. So, you know, we need that hierarchy in order to help us figure out where we fit and to define ourselves within a structure. So, yeah, it's not all bad.
That is funny. Yeah, about the participation awards and not keeping score. And, you know, I just sometimes reflect on that and think, you know, as hard as it is to lose sometimes, you just learn so much through the process of competing, because the reality is we do compete for jobs in the future. We do compete for positions at schools, post-secondary schools, you know, in many different ways in adult world. So I think, you know, being protected from it to a certain extent and then thrown into it, that's tough.
Yeah. And you see that a lot with some of the kids in terms of going to universities. At one point I was teaching at one of the colleges, and it always amazed me how there was this sort of generation of kids who came in thinking that they were going to get 100% automatically. And then if you were doing a paper, well, I have 100, so why am I losing 1 point? Why am I at 97? When, you know, the idea of the real world is that you start at 0 and you build up, you know. So all of these things kind of apply, and they start with being competitive and teaching that competitive skill set to your kids. Life is unfortunately competitive. That is the nature of it.
Yeah, great points. And now we've talked a lot about the positive. Can you share with us when competition, you know, is unhealthy or not productive for our kids? What are the signs we should look for? What are the situations? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think with children and teenagers, you know, the key is to recognize the signs of stress. So we would be talking about, you know, for example, are they sleeping? Are they having problems sleeping? Kids who are in too competitive an area will have signs of anxiety. So they might not be sleeping. They might lose their appetite and stop eating. They might find it hard to focus because they're always thinking about where am I at? What's next? You might see trouble with emotions. So they're just highly, every little thing triggers a meltdown. Any little request triggers a meltdown of tears or screaming or whatever that's coming out for them as. So anytime you see any issues around sort of instability with emotion regulation, then that's a really good sign that we're not in the best of headspaces. And one of the places we'd look at is, are you feeling overwhelmed with whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's a competition or competition through school or even competition with yourself in terms of your grades and your expectations.
And I do think kids do put a lot of pressure on themselves to do well in class, and they know sometimes what other kids are getting for grades, and then they can feel overwhelmed and, you know, left behind sometimes. And there is that component, like you were saying, and that can be signs for parents. You know, why aren't they sleeping? Oh, they're not eating what they should. They just seem irritable. You know, I was talking about a report in the last episode we did about that Sick Kids report that came out about the mental health of children and youth during the pandemic. And the irritability piece is really inattentiveness and irritability have been showing up as particular concern for them.
Yeah, and those are signs for sure. Anytime you have children where they're doing those kind of big emotions, big feelings, then that's a good sign that something's up and we need to check in on where they're at.
Absolutely. And so can you suggest a couple of ways we can foster healthy competition amongst our families and our kids?
Yeah, so the best way to foster it is to model it. So playing games, having those competitions, you don't always have to let your kids win. You should let them lose sometimes because they need that skill too. Make it fun. And I think make it, recognizing that you need to have not only individual competition, but group competition too. So if you have siblings who fight, make them work together, team them up in a game so that they can start to build each other up. And the biggest piece I would say in anything is really modeling. As parents, we need to model. Stop yelling at the coaches. Stop being a sore loser. Stop being overly competitive and putting other people down. If we can model it, our kids can learn it, and that's really where it's gonna change.
Yeah, I think that's a terrific perspective on the parents and thinking, okay, well, let me check myself. Is my child feeling overwhelmed or stressed? Does that have anything to do with my own personal reactions in this situation? And because kids pick up on our anxieties and our worry and our fears subliminally, they just sort of pick up the energy and they can start to react that way. So being calm, being mindful, checking ourselves and thinking, well, how am I reacting when I lose? How am I reacting when I win? What am I saying behind closed doors about, like you said, the coaches and so on. So that's really good advice. Well, I just want to thank you so much for being on the show today.
No problem.
Many, many, many interesting things for us to think about with respect to competition, the positive aspects, as well as a few of the negative things and what to look out for in our kids. So thank you, Candice.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I want to thank both of my guests today for their insights and reflection about competition. And leading up to this show, I actually did some informal polls on social media to find out about parents in Halton and surrounding areas. What were their perspectives on competition? Is it good for kids, or does it foster resiliency, or, that kind of thing? And so what happened was, overwhelmingly, the parents felt that competition was a good thing, that it developed those skills, but acknowledged that there are good days and bad days with anything. So for more information about today's program, please visit beyondtheclassroom.ca. Thank you for watching.